Today's daf is daf mem base in Sanhedrin, as we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Simba Sarva Shivya. And again, we're learning for the yard site of Nachum Tzvi ben Abba. Ben Abba. Omerle, the second line on the page, daf mem base Amrav. Omerle Ravacha mi difti Ravina. So Ravacha ben Difti said to Ravina, "Velivra chatova meitiv." We just said that we were talking about that you break the bracha of when we're Mekadosh HaChodesh, right? When we're Mechadish HaChodesh, we make the bracha of Kiddush HaChodesh, and either in the first, up to the first opinion was until 7 days in the new month, and or from the Molad. Some days one was until the 16th day, meaning until half the month is done. So there's a question of how they learn, but the question is, what bracha do you make? Why don't we make the Tova Meitiv? Hashem gives us the moon from which we could see. What do you mean? If the moon is not filling up, meaning when it's dark, do we make Diana Emes like a bracha that you made for sad news? Why do you make a bracha for good news if you don't make a corresponding bracha for bad news? Deliver Chatov Meitiv. Do we make a bracha when the moon is extremely concave, meaning when it's missing, we don't see the light? Do we make a bracha for Dayan Emes like so that we should also make a bracha to Meiv? So make a bracha both of them. Make a bracha when the new moon shines, and we make a bracha for Hatova Meitiv, and when the moon goes down, meaning before the Nola, when you don't see the moon hardly at all, then you should say Dayan Emes. It's keeping the Hainu Urchi, since that's the normal way that God created the world and it renews itself constantly, but it's normal to see this every month. In other words, we only make the bracha about Tova Meitiv on especially good news. Maybe when a child is born, a person came into a lot of money, or a person died, we make Dayana Emes. In other words, we only make these brachas on extraordinary occasions, not on things that happen normally. Another thing in Ravacha, we're going to have a bunch of things in Ravacha. Rav Chanina said in Ravasi, whoever makes the breakers a chodesh each month, bismano, in the right time, if he greets the Shechina itself, Hashem himself. Ksiv hachad says here, hachodesh is elachem, rosh chodashim, hachodesh hazeh. Ksiv hasam, and it says there, zeh keli vanveyu. Both of these are in Shmos, right? Hachodesh is elachem we had last week. We're going to have zeh keli vanveyu in a couple of weeks, right? Zeh keli vanveyu. So we have the gzeir shav of zeh. So if you renew the month with a proper bracha, it's as if you greet God. If that's the only mitzvah that we were able to do, kol chodesh v'chodesh, and we did it each month, that's enough. In other words, that's the only mitzvah, he says. Right? Rashi says, if this is the only mitzvah they were zocha to, that we merited just to do this mitzvah to greet God each month, that would be enough. From Rabbi Hilkach, since it's such an important mitzvah, we should say it's standing up. Mereimar, and a lot of this is brought down. We actually say this in the Berkas HaChodesh, right? We say these words there. Mereimar umar sutra makasfi adadi umavarchi. They would either usually it means that they were on shoulder to shoulder, or they were on somebody else's shoulders. Maybe they couldn't walk, so they would stand on the shoulders and they would make the bracha to be able to see the new moon. In Eretz Yisrael, they only made a simple bracha. Baruch Hashem l'ken b'chalam, Machadish Chadashim, who makes the new moon come out. Amalei, so he answered him, Hi Nashidan Nami Varchi. That's a very simple bracha. Even people who were less educated, like in those days, women were less educated, not like today, but in those days, women were less educated. Even our women can make that bracha. We should make a special bracha. Ella, Rav Yehuda said, Baruch, it means with Shem Malchus, Baruch Hashem who with his words created the heavens, Uvruach Piv, and with the spirit of his mouth, or the wind of his mouth, calls from all their hosts, Chokuzman, ordinances and times, he gave us on them, gave everything, put everything in its right orbit, Shlo Yishanos Tafkidim, they shouldn't change their tasks. Sasam Usmichem, Esmechem, they were glad and rejoiceful, Lasas Ritzon Konim, to do the will of their creator. Pole Emes, they're truthful workers, they do their job. Shupalos and Emes, their jobs, their tasks are done properly. Ulavana Omer Shetischadesh, and he told the moon, Hashem commanded the moon to renew itself each month. So it should be a crown of glory. La'amuse boten, to those he sustains from the womb, meaning to us, to humanity. We also too will be mechudash bezrat Hashem from the Golus, Kamosa, Ulafar Yosem, and to glorify their creator, Al Shem Kvod Malchuso, on the name of the honor of his kingdom, Baruch Atah Hashem Echad HaShadashim, which is basically the bracha that we make each month. The pasuk goes on, and this pasuk is really nothing to do with what we just said, but it's because of the same author of Rav Chanina, Rav Asam, Rav Yochanan. Ki tachbulos tasaloch, because with wise advice, tasaloch you will make war. With good advice, you'll make war. Good counsel. How so? What does that mean? Where do you find that the war of Torah, in other words, learning and studying and coming to good conclusions and spreading Torah, that war of Torah, where do you find that successful? The one who has bundles of the Mishnah. What does that mean? It's not enough just to be able to be smart and to be able to deduce one thing from another. If you don't know the Mishnayos, I sometimes talk to a fella who has all kinds of svaras and good ideas, and he figures this and this. He makes his own pshat. Doesn't look at Rashi or Midrashim or anything like that. It's like a Bible. What do they call a Bible scholar? They think they know everything. No, but who's the one who can actually who can actually affect the proper war of Torah and be successful? The one who learns the Mishnah. Said he has bundles of Mishnah in his hands. Rabbi Yosef himself was known for that, not just being like an Oker Horim with like Rabbi Kiva with tremendous svaras, but he actually had all the Mishnayos and the Brises. He learned that. He called by himself a Rav Tfuos B'koach Shor. You have much produce with the power of the ox. In other words, if you have all the power of learning Torah, take a look at this Rashi, Mechamta Shel Torah, near the end of the Bach, Mechamta Shel Torah, how to paskin, Balamad al to make it come out properly. In other words, to come to the proper conclusion, Valikre, on its proper foundation. Local Adam, I'm a fool, but just not like a person who just could be mafalful and he could say, oh, I could say this, I could say that. And he's sharp, Ubal Svar, and he has good logic. Below Laman Mishnas, but he didn't learn the Mishnah, Brises. He didn't learn the Torah Shabbat Pehar. He didn't learn all that. How will he know? Where will he know it from? He just can't make it up on his own. A person will learn Mishnah Harbe, Shimi Starchlo Tam. If he needs a reason, why is this over here? You'll Mishnah Cheres. Since he learned another Mishnah over there in Gittin or some other Masechta, he'll know. If he seems to have a contradiction between two things, from learning many Mishnayos, he'll say, oh, Hamani Ploni, that goes like that, Shita, who disagrees. That's the advantage of learning the Gemara. We always said this, that even if in your learning Be'iyun in the first man in the yeshiva, in the morning seder in the yeshiva, you're learning Be'iyun, you should still have a seder to learn the Gemara, because you could sit there on Daf Beis or Daf Gimel and Claire Shilas all day and Svaras and everything, but it might be a favorite Gemara later on in Daf Chav. So it's important to learn a lot of Mishnah and Brisa. So we said if one person said that the murder or the sin, whatever the offense was, took place at the second hour of the day, let's say 7 o'clock in the morning, and one said it was at 8 o'clock in the morning, their testimony is consistent, because you can make a mistake by that amount. Again, this is before they had watches and clocks. That only comes to hours. Let's say, we're talking about what hour of the day, but let's say one says it took place before the sun rose. And one said it took place after the sun rose. Their testimony is disqualified because they're certainly contradicting one another. And as we said, that's actually one of the chakiras. When did it take place? We said, even if the bedikos, not like Rav Chissa said yesterday, even if by the bedikos, if one says the pants were black and one said the pants were white, they contradict one another, even on the bedikos, which if they didn't know at all what color it was, that's okay. But if they contradict one another, their testimony is also disqualified. But the Gemara says, gee, it's obvious. If one says it took place before sunrise and after sunrise, then obviously they are not consistent. You can't say they made a mistake in a few minutes or what hour the day was. Everybody could see if the sun rose or not. One says it took place before the sun rose. Ben nets is the case. The same thing means in middle of the sunrise. That also is disqualified, because one said it took place before, one said it took place in the middle of the sunrise. That's not the same time. Hanami Pshit, isn't that also obvious? The same man might think, Habi Galuya Koi. What happened was he saw the glow of the sun as it was coming up. Many times before sunrise, you could still see the glow of the sun about to rise before the sun actually rose. So, in other words, the first witness said it took place before sunrise. The second one says, I think it was the middle of sunrise. So I might think that's not inconsistent. Maybe the second one who said it was the middle of sunrise, it was also before sunrise, but he just saw the rays, the shine of the sun coming up, and therefore the testimony is consistent. Kamashmon that it's not consistent. If one said it's not, but it's before sunrise, and one said it's the middle of sunrise, then we disqualify their testimony. And we said after Yimachnisos, what is that talking about? We said, let's say if one of the Adim say, I want to make an argument over here, they don't accept that. Adim are just supposed to say what they saw, and that's it. They don't take part in the deliberations or offer opinions. The Talmidim, who sit in front of the judges, they may not offer something against them on the side of guilt, but they could offer something schus. And if they have something good to say, we put them up and they stay there all day. That's what the Mishnah said. So the Gemara says, only that day he sits up and not, let's say the deliberations took several days. If there was substance to what this Talmud said, he never doesn't go down. He stays there for the remainder of the deliberations until the verdict. If there's nothing in what he said, in other words, his argument turned out to be of no value. He doesn't go down that whole day. In other words, you don't send him down right away. That his aliyah, so his ascendancy to the judge's podium is not a yeridalo, is not an embarrassment for him. It's not a yerida. In other words, if you have something to say good, you have something to say good, you raise your hand and you say something good, that's good. If you have something to say that's bad, it's a bigger embarrassment. So in order not to embarrass him, once he says, I have something to say on the defendant's behalf, and he's put up on the podium, he can stay there all day, even if his words are no good. But it's mashma that if his words are good, if his mashma, he stay there all the time. So how do you say that he only stays that day? You say the rest of the day too. I'm Rabbi, Targuma ein mamish v'dvarav. When we say he stays there all day, that's if there's not mamish v'dvarav. In other words, he said im yesh v'dvarav ve'yored kol hayom. But if there's not, when we say that he only stays up that day, kol hayom kula, that means if there's nothing in what he says. It says he stays there up all day, and below Yored Misham, he doesn't come down the whole day. We listen to him. So he only stays up for the day. Even if there's nothing in what he says, there's no substance in what he says, he still stays up all the day not to embarrass him. But if there is substance in what he says, he stays up not only that day, but until the end of the court deliberations. Matzalos chus. So if they find a schus for him, so he's immediately dismissed. He's immediately found not guilty. And he's exonerated. He goes out. He goes home free. If not, if there's a debate and they can't come to a conclusion, and so what do? They keep it overnight. In other words, if it looks like they're finding him guilty, they're not. They leave it till the next day, right? They delay it till the next day, and they set aside in pairs, and they don't drink much. They don't eat much. They don't drink much. They gotta have to have clear head. And then they debate themselves, even after the pairs all night, and the next day they come up back to court. So it says there when they deliberate in pairs, they shouldn't eat much or drink much. Don't drink wine. Why shouldn't they drink wine? Well, obviously you don't want them to be inebriated, but even a little bit of wine, why not? The pasuk says, don't give the kings to drink for the rosamash shecher, and don't allow the princes to say, where's the beer? Where's the strong drink? Hoskin baraza shalom. Those who deal, Rosen literally means princes or young kings. But Yidarshanet baraza shalom, the ones who are occupied with the depths of the deep secrets of the world, meaning the Torah, figuring out if this guy's chayiv or not, al yishtaku, they shouldn't become inebriated. Then the Mishnah said, okay, fine, let's say it's a hung court. Let's say it's 12 to 11 for guilt. What do? You start adding on pairs up till you get 71, right? Until they come to a conclusion. Let's say at the end it's still 36 to 35 against the defendant. So what do we do when you've added everybody you can? The end of the mission says, what do? They debate, right? Done an elu connected elu ad shiur echad men mechayav and different mazakan until one of the people switches their position.
Who pays the salary of
The public.
the public fund or something?
Yeah, the public funds. We'll talk tomorrow about, we'll talk about who pays for the execution implements and all that stuff. Yeah, presumably the public pays for the funds pays for the shoftim. How else could you have it? In America, in many places, judges run for office on a ballot. It's the most ridiculous thing, right? Of course, the system we have here isn't much without getting into the 2-year-old debate about, court reform and all that. But, is there a good system? Nobody's come out with a good system. Well, Moshe appointed them. Originally, Moshe appointed them, and they have to have smicha going on and on and on. Who pays their salaries? Presumably, they're paid from public funds. Okay, low row mine. Let's say nobody could find, they can't come to a conclusion. It's a hung court. If you can't find him guilty because you have a 36-35 for guilt, you can't kill him unless you have a majority of 2. You let him go free. What do you have to go through this whole process? If you have a court of 23, and it's, let's say, 12-11 against, right? If it's 12-11 for, he's obviously innocent. But it's 12 against, say start adding more people. What do you have to add more people? Just say, just like if it's a hung court at 71, say the same thing. If it's a hung court at 23, you should also let him go free. Because it's not nice that the Bezdin should come out there. It's a Rashi says it's a ganai. It's a shame for the Bezdin that they should leave, without making a decision. That's really what happened over here. They can't make a decision. It's a hung court, 12-11 against. So you try to do everything you can to come to a conclusion. It's a bizoyim. Again, somebody said that the gears was this way. Why doesn't he pater him initially? There is a sheet of Rav Yossi who says like that. The time of Rav Yossi Omer, just like 71 is the maximum number of judges you can have on the Supreme Court. You don't add that either. That's takashita. In other words, if it's a hung court at 12-11, goes out free. That's it. What do you do here when there's a hung jury? They also let the guy go out free, or they retry the case. That's double jeopardy. When it comes to money matters, we could say nizdaken hadin. We're not sure what that word nizdaken is from the word like zaken. It's old. What does that mean? By money matters, we say it's an old matter. But we don't say it by capital cases. What does that mean? Mine is documented. What do we mean? Ilema kashdina. And Rashi explains here that kashdina means zoken din. This din is old, v'amak and deep, v'kosha and hard, v'tzorch lamta. We can't come to a conclusion. If that's what it means, so that's what it's more mustafa to say. By a capital case, it's very complicated, right? And you could say by a capital case, it's a hung court. It's very complicated. You can't come to a conclusion. By a money matter, you'd think it's a lot easier. He switches it around. In other words, by a money matter, you can always come to a conclusion one way or another. By a capital case, sometimes we just say, we have no conclusion. We can't come to a conclusion. Ravashi Omer, no, don't switch it around. Mine is that, and it doesn't mean that it's a hard, difficult case and we can't come to a conclusion. Chacham dina. Rather, we've done the right thing. Chacham dina, Rashi says, a few lines from down on the page. If we've decided this matter properly, nobody has to change their opinion. We don't say that. When it comes to capital case, even after the verdict has been rendered, if one person we'll see can find him, has some reason to find him innocent, we say that. So by a financial case, we say chacham dina. Okay, we've decided this properly. There's no reason for anybody to change their opinion. But when it comes to a capital case, we don't say that because you could still change your opinion, and we look for reasons to find him innocent even after the verdict was rendered. Meisvei, the elder, like the chief justice, Omer Nistakan Adin, he says those words, Nistakan Adin. It's either difficult or it's chacham. If you say, okay, we've done judge properly, the gadol takes the podium and announces, gets up and says, we've judged this properly. If you say it's difficult, it's not enough that the Chief Justice has to get up and say, well, we can't come to a conclusion. He has to embarrass himself by saying, after all this deliberation and everything, we can't come to a conclusion. Or saying, better that he should say it. Better that the president or the president of the court, the chief justice, should say we can't come to a conclusion, rather than a lesser judge say that and embarrass him. You should be better to embarrass yourself than embarrass somebody else. And if you make yourself the laughing stock, not so bad. If other people making fun of you, that's much worse. Some say no. Yeah, but and if you say that it's difficult, we can't come. That's why the chief justice should get up and say that we can't come to a conclusion and embarrass himself rather than have other people embarrass him. But if he means to say that Misdakana means that we've come to a good judgment here. So do you need the chief justice to praise himself and says, well, we've come to a good conclusion here. Nobody should argue this. Others should praise you, but you shouldn't praise yourself. So Shani Milsabina, as if when it comes to a court case, the one who is supposed to announce the verdict or say we don't have a verdict, that's put on the chief justice. That's his job. As we're going to see, we had this before. When they finished the debate, they brought the defendant back in. The elder of the judges, meaning the chief justice, Omer, ish ploni atazaki, ish ploni atachayev. If it's a financial case, do it that way. Or if it's a capital case, we just say, you are either innocent or you're found guilty. Halach bodkin, that ends the 5th parak. Now we begin the 6th parak, and we're going to talk really here about the executions. We've talked here till now about interrogating the witnesses, explaining what the witnesses have to do, what the witnesses can say, what they can't say. They can't take part in the deliberations, who takes part in the deliberations, how the deliberations work until the time of the verdict. Once the verdict has been rendered, and as we said, the verdict here in a capital case is what? Capital case by definition means it's a capital case where he's sentenced to death. There's 4 kinds of death: skila, sreifa, hereg, and chenek. We'll talk first about skila, which is like the first one. So that actually the next parak talks about the beginning of the next parak says Arba Misa tells you what the 4 are, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here in the 6th parak talking about skila. So Nigmar Adin, once the verdict has been rendered, Motzino Sosoka, they take him out to stone him. And as we said before, how does the stoning take place? We'll see. We're going to talk about it many times that they first throw him off a height of 2 stories. So with his height, let's say his head is another story, so it's like he's falling 3 stories, and that usually should kill him right then and there. But then they put a stone on him or more stones to finish him off. And then, of course, he's hung subsequently. Nigmar Adin. Once the verdict has been rendered, they take him out to stone him. Now, where do they stone him? Not in the hallway of the court. They don't do it there. They take him out. Beis Haskila, where is the place of execution? Pardon?
Off the hill.
Off a hill. They take him off. It's far away from Bezdin. Rachok mi Bezdin. Shneimar Hotzeis HaMakalel. The Makalel who cursed God and they wanted to know how to judge him and he had to be stoned. It says Hotzeis HaMakalel Michutz LaMachna. Take him out. Echad Omer al Pesach Bezdin. Now they had one, let's say, bailiff or court attendant who stood at the door of the Bezdin, and v'hasudim biyado, he had like a sutter, let's call it a flag in his hand. He had a flag in his hand. And then near the place of execution, the Beis Haskila, there was a horse and a rider on the horse, far away, Kadeshiro, far enough away, but not too far enough that he could spot, he could see the flag man. We'll call him the flag man, the guy standing with the flag outside the court. And we'll see what the purpose was. So they could see one another. Omer Echad Yesh Lamav Schus. He was already executed. He was taken and he's on his way to the Beis Haskila. And then somebody says, wait a minute. One of the judges or one of the Talmidim said, wait a minute. I think we can reverse it. I found a reason to find him innocent. So halal mein v'sudrin. So the flag man waves the flag. The horseman sees the flag and he rides quickly to stop the execution. Right? Halal mein v'sudrin v'asus ratz umabidin. He stops the execution until the argument can be debated in court. They wait for that. They didn't have cell phones. Even if, as the defendant, who is now the condemned man, even if he says, "Wait a minute, I have a reason to find myself innocent," please listen to me. Machzino, so they bring him back. And that's, again, if he says that, then the horseman, I guess, comes back and tells him he's got to have something to say, and they bring him back. I feel even 4 or 5 times. As long as there's something substantive to what he said, he can't say all day, no, I want to go back, I want to go back, I want to go back. Said even 4 or 5 times. The Gemara will explain how that 4 or 5 times works. Okay, the question is, where was the Beis Haskila? Was it really outside of the Bezdin, the Sulo, and not? What was it? It was down the road, let's say a block away from the Bezdin. Is that good enough? But Beis Haskila is outside of the 3 machnos. What are the 3 machnos? The machna Kohen is the Azara. The machna Levia is the Harabayas. Machna Yisrael is all of Yerushalayim. So the point was, it had to be outside the walls of Yerushalayim. Why do you say it was just
not only Yerushalayim?
Yeah, just Yerushalayim. Yeah.
The 23.
Well, what? What are you saying? What 23?
Reports of 23 all over the place.
That's right. But we're talking here about how far it had to be away from the Bezdin. We'll talk about that. The answer will answer your question. We'll see the answer to the question. The point is, if it was in Yerushalayim, it wasn't enough just to be far away down the block. It had to be all the way outside of Yerushalayim. Wherever the court, there were courts. There was a court of 23 outside the Azara. There was a court of 3 in several places. They could have had several courts there. But time basis skill has to be far away out of all the machnos, and that would mean that if they were outside of Yerushalayim, apparently it had to be very far away. It says, "Hey, can comment? You're right. They had to be outside the machnos." Let's say the Bezdin was outside of Yerushalayim. Right, the Bezdin was outside, was about Avdin. Avdin Beis Haskila chutz the Bezdin. In other words, that's the point. If it's in Yerushalayim, it has to be outside of all 3 machnos. But if it's outside of Yerushalayim, it has to be enough far away that you can't see it. It shouldn't look like a Bezdin who likes to murder everybody. Oh, here's we're taking a tour. You see this? You see the court? This is a nice court. Here's where we killed them, right here, right next door. You don't want it right next door. You want it far away. It shouldn't be a bazayim. Oh, very good. You want it far away so that there's enough time for him to be saved. We just said that if somebody finds an excuse to find him innocent after he's already being taken out to the gallows, so to speak, right? Or he finds himself, but if he's right there next to the court, there's no time. As soon as he's taken out, he's killed. There's no time. This gives a little bit of a time lapse to give him another chance to be saved. Now, so we say here that he's basically taken out of all 3 machno. If the court was in Yerushalayim, he's got to be taken outside of Yerushalayim. That's where they had the hangman. Minani Mili. Where did we get this idea that he had to be taken out of 3 machnos? He said, yeah, he has to be taken out of 3 machnos. We learned Beis Haskila is outside from us. Where do we know it? From Anani Mili. Tan Rabbanan, listen carefully. Hotzias Makal, who was condemned to stoning, to skila, right? And he said, condemned to death. Hotzias Makal, El Michutz Lamachne. El Michutz Lamachne. Which machne? Is it the machne Kahuna, Levia, or Yisrael? It's actually out of all 3. Maybe it's only out of 1. So the answer is here. How do we know that? In other words, it's very clear that we learn out the Beis Haskila has to be far away from where, because it says Hotzias Makalo, where he was taken out the Beis Haskila, and it says in another place, chutz lamachnos, right? Here it says take the makal out of the machna. Just says machna. It doesn't say machanot, machaneh, right? What are parmenas rafim? There's a par helm davashal tzibur. When the Bezdin made a mistake, when the most of the tzibur followed the Bezdin's wrong psak, that's called the par ha'eda, or the par helm davashal tzibur. And there's also parmenas rafim, was also the par komishiach for the coin. If the coin gadol makes a mistake and does an avera, let's say that you're chayiv karis for, if you did it the mesid and mishogi chayiv chatos, he brings what's called the par kohen mashiach. They're both similar. We say it every day. Nezim makoma and parmenas rafim, sirim rafim. Those are 2 that are burnt, meaning the shechita is done in the Azara. They're kodesh kodashim, but they're burnt outside of Yerushalayim. So it says nemer kam michutz lamachne. Here, when it comes to skila, when it comes to the mechalel, parmenas rafim chutz lamachne. Malahal chutz l'shash. Just like over there, it's chutz lamachne. Afrika kan chutz l'shach machnas. Okay, so now we know. How do we know that the Makalo, that the Beis Haskila is outside of Yerushalayim, outside of the 3 machnos? Because the parmenas rafim are also burnt outside of the 3 machnos, not the shechita. They're burnt outside of us. That's the Gzeira Shava, period. Now we have the Gzeira Shava. Now we're going to say, how do we know over there? How do we know that by the parmenas rafim that they're burnt outside? We're going to see the psukim. But first understand it's the Gzeira Shava because we're going to come back to this. How do we know when it comes to the par misrafim that they're burnt outside of 3 machnas? The Tanur Rabbanan hotzi es kol hapar el michutz lamachna. Take this par. This is the par ha'eda, the par helam davar shel tzibur. Take it out of the chutz lamachna. Now again, chutz l'shalosh machnos. Is it out of all 3 atomer? Atomer chutz l'shalosh machnos or eino ella chutz lamachnachas? It says machna. Does it mean all 3? Do you mean that all 3, or is it maybe machas? Shuomer el michutz lamachna b'par ha'eda. When it says el michutz lamachna b'par ha'eda, she'ein talmud lomer. Why did it say el michutz lamachna b'par ha'eda? It says hotzi es kol par, and then by par it says el michutz lamachna b'par. You don't have to say that. It says there you burn that the way you burn the par kohen Mashiach. So we already know that it had to be there. So the reason it says el michutz lamachna b'par, that's the second machna. Rashi says here, right. This is it. Right. The Rashi right before the lines get wide. Chain Talmud Ein Ol Lamed Men Okum Sharei Kfar Nemer Kasher Sarv Hasapar Rishon Shal Mashiach Uva Kfar Nemer El Michutz Lamachne. So by Kol Mashiach it says El Michutz Lamachne the first time. It says Votziel it's called Par Michutz Lamachne, and then it says that's by Par Kol Mashiach, and then it says by the Par Helm Davar Shel Tzibur it says El Michutz Lamachne. Right? Why does it say El Pesach? Those words are not necessary because it already says you burn it where you burnt the first one, the par kol Mashiach. So it says Hotzi es kol par by kol Mashiach. Then it says again El michutz lamachna by par helm davar shel tzibur. So that's already the second one. Back in the Gemara Shein Tal Mishak Nemer and by there Ukshaomer El michutz lamachna bedeshen. The Gemara goes on. So we already know it's 2 machnas, right? Because it says twice, one by par kol Mashiach and one by par helm davar shel tzibur, and it didn't have to say that because we already know that you burn it in the same place as the par kol Mashiach. So we already know that. So we already had now it takes out of 2 machnas, even though it only said hotzi es kol par michutz. It said machna, but we know that that's the second one because we already know from par kol Mashiach that that's the first one. So when it says by par helm davar, it says also V'hotzi el michutz lamachna b'para eda. That's the par helm davar shel tzibur. Obviously means another machnas. That's the second one. Ukshu omer, because we know that the second one is burnt like the first one. Ukshu omer el michutz lamachna bedeshem. When it says the ashes should be outside. Again, it says michutz lamachna. Shein talmud lo shekvar nemer al shefach hadefen yisarv. We already knows that it has to. You have to this is by the tapuch, when you have too many ashes on the mizbeach, you take them outside, and it says over there el michutz lamachna. And it says elsewhere, "Al shefach hadeshen yisarv." They should be burned there on the pile of the deshen. So we already know that. So why does it say al michutz lamachna bedeshen? Lit lamach shlisha. So that burning also take place out of 3. The fact is, when we learned Zvach, we saw that there's actually 3 or 4 different places of burning. But there we're talking about where it's burnt out of all, where it's outside of all 3 machnos. So therefore, we see that when the person we see here that by the par misrafim, that has to be out of all 3 machanos. Okay, so now the question is, why though is the Gzeir Shava? Again, they had a Kabbalah how learning Gzeir Shava, but why do you learn out from the Gzeir Shava from par misrafim? Why don't you learn out the Leilach Mishchutei Chutz? What's the halach if you shecht outside the base of Mikdash? That means outside the Azara. Right? You're even if you're on Harabayis, you're in Machana Leviah, and you're in Yerushalayim, if you shechter your chayav for shechting a carbon outside of the Azara. So why do you say that the Beis Haskil has to be outside of Yerushalayim, outside of all 3 machnas? Maybe it only has to be outside of 1 machna. Learn from Shchut Chutz. Ma lahol and Chutz lamachna. There it says if you shechted Asher Shchet Chutz lamachna, means achas 1 machna, meaning outside of the Azara, the machna hakuna. Afkan Chutz lamachna. Maybe here also the Beis Haskil should be outside of the Azara. It doesn't have to be outside of the Harabayis. It doesn't have to be outside of Yerushalayim. So Mistaver mi par misrafim havlim. Better learn it out from par misrafim. Why? Shekain hotziel michutz lamachna. In both cases, it says hotziel michutz lamachna. It says by the makalel, take him outside of the machna, and it says by the par misrafim, it says v'hotziel kol par el michutz lamachna. So it's similar language. Machshir, both of them are preparations for doing the mitzvah. In this case, executing this person who has to be killed. And in the case of bringing the carbon, par misrafim, it's both a hachshir umachaper, and it's both a kapara. The execution is a kapara for the sinner, and the par misrafim are also kaparas for the kohen gadol and for the tzibur. Zad Rabba mishchus level. Why don't you learn from chutz? Why? Shekain adam. In both cases, we're talking about a person shechting. and a person being executed, right? So both those, as opposed to the Parmas Rafim, is not a person. Chote, in both cases, we have a sinner. The Shochet B'chutz is a sinner, and the Makal is a sinner. Bin Shama, right? We're talking about the sinner, we're not talking about the animals are not sinners. Bin Shama, in both cases, right? In both cases, you're killing, either executing the defendant or killing or shechting a carbon, as opposed to Parmas Rafim, where it's already been shechted. It was shechted inside the Beis Hamikdash properly. Now you're talking about where do you burn it? So in both cases, you're talking about burning. So maybe there's a svar to say shalom on and pigel. What does it mean pigel over here? That this pigel here, as Rashi explains, is not the pigel of chutzlas man, but it's a chutzlas makom. But the point is, it applies to shchutei chutz, that if you shecht outside the right place, you're chayav for it's pigel. It's a kind of a pigel, and also in a case of Parmas Rafim, you're not shechting it outside of the right place. You're shechting it in the right place. It's already in the right spot. Rashi says here, 5 lines from the bottom of the page, pigel michutz lamachna d'shchutei chutz umakalo iatamotze pigel ayidei oso chutz lamachna. In other words, when it comes to the pigel shchutei chutz, michutz lamachna d'shchutei chutz umakalo iatamotze pigel ayidei oso chutz lamachna. Aval param ruim mispagel ayidei oso chutz lamachna shimshachtu al amanas lahakdei mum. In other words, when it comes to Parmas Rafim, you could have a case of pigel if he shechted in the Beis Hamikdash. Amanas said he's going to be makter the things chutz lechutz, but shchutei chutz, there's no pigel there because the Yisr chutz says pigel is only if you shechted inside the Beis Hamikdash. Amanas said you're going to be makter it outside the right time or the wrong place. You're going to zorek the dam or makter the muim outside of the right place or outside of the right zman. So that pigel has that, but that doesn't apply to shchutei chutz, and it certainly doesn't apply to executing somebody. In other words, pigel is when it comes to pigel is only by Parmas Rafim, not by the other two. So maybe you should learn out Makalo from shchutei chutz because there's no pigel by either one of them. The answer is machshir me machshir out of flay. You'd rather say machshir machshir. In other words, the fact is that we're talking about where do you perform a preparation for a mitzvah, the mitzvah of executing the defendant if he's been found guilty, and the mitzvah of bringing Parmas Rafim, better learn it out from there. So just like by Parmas Rafim, we've proved from all these hotzeis and michutz, all that it's outside of 3 machnos. We have Xavier Shava. Here it says al michutz lamachna, there it says al michutz lamachna. So therefore, again, it says ne'emar, going back to the drasha. It says, right, ne'emar, Rashi said, the Gemara said rather, ne'emar kan michutz lamachna, Parmas Rafim michutz lamachna. It's just like if that's out of 3 machnos, here it's also 3 machnos. Rav Papa gives a different drasha. Rav Papa Amar, and we'll explain, we're going to ask a kasha Rav Papa, we'll see. Rav Papa Amar, Moshe Hekav, where was Moshe? The Machna Levia. He wasn't in the Azara, he was in Machna Levia. Hashem told him, take him out of the Machna, that would be one, the Machna Levia. That's Chutz L'Machna Levia. And then it says, they took him out of another one. He first told Moshe, take him out of your Machna, that's out of Machna Levia. And then it says they took the Makalo out of that Machna, meaning he was already out of the Machna in the Machna, now he's in the Machna Yisrael, and they took him out of that Machna, Chutz L'Machna Yisrael. That's how you know that the Makalo was, then, in other words, he's not learning out of Xavier Shava from Parmas Rafim at all. He's just saying, how do you know that the Makalo, that the base of skill is outside of 3 Machnos? Because Hashem said to Moshe, take him out of your Machna. And then it says, now he's in Machna Yisrael. And then they said they took him out of there. So, think more Haimi Boy Lasiya. What do you mean? By Makalo, that's telling you that they follow the rules that Hashem told Moshe to take him out of your Machna, and means they took him out of that Machna. Presumably it's going on to Machna Levia, so he'd still be in Machna Yisrael. No, we have a special pasuk that it says Beferish Uven Yisrael Asu Kasher Siva Hashemas Moshe. So we already know that they followed that. So why does it say Bayotziu? Right, Bayotziu. Therefore, it must mean they took him out of Machna Yisrael also into Machna, into the outside of all 3 Machnas, outside of Machna Yisrael. Elamayatza says the Gemara, if you're darshaning all this by Yirgmo Sa'ava and Mayavdulay, if you're darshaning every little thing by Yotzius and Kam Mechutz Lamachna, by Yirgmo Sa'ava, what does that teach? Mayavdulay, Hamiboilo Keretanya, by Yirgmo Sa'ava, Oso v'lo ksuso. Even though there's another Oso there, Rashi says, it says Oso without his garments. In other words, he's stone naked. It says Evan, by Yirgmo Oso teach me himself, the plain person without any clothing, naked. Evan, what does Evan teach me? Shem Meis Evan Achas Yatza. In other words, if he died with 1 stone on him, you place a stone, if that was enough to kill him, you're Yotze. Why does it say Evan and Avonim? Rashi tells us that by Makalo it says Evan, by Makoshish Eitzim, which also is killed with skill, it says Avonim. Right? Why does it say, Avonim there? Why? Because Rachman Evan says Evan Avimina, Lo Mes Bachada, Lo Nes Yachrita. You kill him with one stone. If that doesn't do the trick, that's it. He goes out. It's like what's the rule? If the hangman's noose doesn't kill him, he goes out free. They had that in many societies, right? Maybe also you don't bring another one. You don't bring another one to kill him. No. You start with one stone, but if he needs more stones, because of you originally bring at least two stones. Because of Evan, you start with one. Back in the Kasha and Papa, what is Rav Papa telling me? Well, I can learn it out of the pasuk because it says, take him out of your machne, and then it says they took him out of another machne. So he took him out of Leviah to Yisrael, took him out of Yisrael to outside of Yerushalayim. How does Rav Papa learn there? How does he go against the Tanu? Said it's based on Xavier Shava of Nemar. It says El Michutz Lamachne by Makal and says Michutz Lamachne by Parmenas Rafim. So Ilu Lo Nemar come. This is what it means to say. Elo Nemar. This is what the Brisa means to say. If it wouldn't say a pasuk, Rav Papa saying what the Brisa means is if it wouldn't have the pasuk telling me beferish that the Makal is out of all the machnos. Why? Because he told Moshe take him out of your machna. It means out of Leviah to Yisrael, and then they Otsu, and therefore they took him out of Yisrael to outside of all three machnos. If it wouldn't say the pasuk, I could have said Xavier Shava. Achshav Shnemer Xikra Xavier Shava Lotzrach. You don't need Xavier Shava. In other words, you don't need. This goes into the whole idea of how many Xavier Shavas were there? Where do you learn the Xavier Shavas? We had a Kabbalah Xavier Shavas only if you learn it from your Rebbe, but how do they have machlokas about it? The answer is they had different Rebbes, and some Farshim say that there was like a number, there was a fixed number, like 2,000 Xavier Shavas, but where do you apply them? That we have a Lach Moshe Messina, there's so many Xavier Shavas, but where do you apply them? That's the discussion. Rav Ashi's was a different Russia. Moshe was in the Machne Leviah, similar to a Papa, but slightly different. So Moshe, where was Moshe in the Machne Leviah? Amalei Rachman Hashem told him, Hotzis Makalo, take out the Makalo, and then it says, right, Chutz Lamachne, right, Hotzis Makalo, take him out. Take him out obviously means take him out of your Machne. Then it says Chutz Lamachne, that's another one, right? So Hotzis Makalo, that's Chutz Lamachne Leviah. Elmi Chutz Lamachne Yisrael. Is that again? Hotzis Makalo means take him out of Leviah. Then it says El Michutz Lamachna. That's like an extra drasha. Take him out. That means take him out of where you are. Then it's El Michutz Lamachna means Machna Yisrael. But Yosef Makalo. What is Yosef Makalo? Lasi. That's to teach me that they followed it. Pegmar, what do you mean? Asi behead because we said it has a fair supposed to be Israel also kasher tziv Hashem as Moshe. Mi boile l'smichu l'dechia. That's the girsa. That what? To tell you that Israel also that they actually the people there put their hands on the head of the person of the condemned man and they push him off the cliff, meaning off the cliff that's 2 stories high. That's how the skila is done. So that's to teach me that Russia. The answer is yes that they did it, and but Israel teach me that they followed up with all the particulars of pushing him off. The Adam come themselves and push him off. Amalei Rabbanon Ravashi. According to you, what do you need him for? According to your drasha, right? What do you need all these hotzi? El michutz machna teaches you right away that it's out of the machna, right? Hotzi means take him out. El michutz means take him out of the other one. What do you need all that for? You don't need all these different hotzis for. You don't need all that drasha. Kasha, Saka, Kasha, Rashi. What do you need all that for if you can learn it out of the basic pasuk itself? You don't need the drashas, al michutz from this one and that one, etc. You don't need all that. That stands as a kasha. I'll pick him here tomorrow, Mitch, for Echad Omei. Pick it up from there.
Why can't we learn from the Surah? They have to take them out of the Machne, and we know that that's the Machne Israel.
From where? From where?
Surah.
From Mitzorah, yeah.
Have to take them out of the Machne, and we know that that's Machne Israel. And a Mitzorah is like a dead person, and the one who's going to be is also like a dead person.
Mitzorah is like a dead person.
That has to go out.
It's a nice drasha. That's the Gemara doesn't give us that drasha, right? Then he's not a Mitzorah. He's not a Mitzorah. Mitzorah is already out.
But he is like a dead person.
Yeah, but he wasn't there already. Yeah. It's a nice drasha, but the Gemara doesn't give that drasha. Here, the Gemara's question was simply if Rav Ashi said, Hotzi is one drasha and Chutz is another drasha, so all these, you got too many Hotzis and Nachmas when it comes to that drasha. But your drasha is an interesting one, but Gemara doesn't say that one. Okay, Shkoyach.